You want to see me analyze and recreate a chain reaction from a viral video or a book or a movie? Great. Let's do the breakfast making machine from the 1968 movie Chitty, Chitty, Bang, Bang.
A machine like this really highlights the difference between something you'd see from a large budget production versus from an individual just building at home. For example, it's impossible for me to recreate every single step in this machine without blowing my budget on a bunch of custom-made mechanized parts. So in this video, I'm recreating the breakfast making machine in my style, or at least as much in my style as I could get it. A machine like this is still so out of my comfort zone for many reasons, if that wasn't obvious. Don't get me wrong, this is already a very charming machine in its own style. It has very efficient object control, and unlike some other famous breakfast making machines, you can actually see every step it takes in preparing the food and getting it on the plate. It's a single cohesive machine. And look at that! It cooks a single egg with a sausage that you don't even need to turn. But again, there are some style distinctions to be made. Now, this wasn't just any food and drink machine like ones I had dealt with before. I had to design something that did the very specific motion of cracking and splitting an egg. So after I bought a portable stove, the first machine motion I started with was the egg delivery, and I recreated it through this multifunctional Connect structure. The egg is held between the empty tape rolls at the end of two small arms, which have rubber bands on the other side to pull the egg apart. This device is on top of a flexing parallelogram which can move the egg to and from the pan. And when it tips forward, it pulls the weight off the edge of this surface to free the rubber bands and split the egg. This left the only problem being that I needed to crack the egg before I pulled it apart, so I attached a knife to a binder clip to get a sharp upward motion. And then I placed it under the egg and put a stopper in the binder clip that could be pulled out with a mousetrap. This was about as efficient of an egg crack that I could get. An interesting decision that I made was that I really wanted to avoid testing the machine with real eggs until I absolutely had to, since using a real egg would have meant cleaning the pan afterwards and replacing the aluminum foil and just dealing with a lot of machine components that aren't really reset friendly. So instead, I cooked some eggs for breakfast every morning and simulated the motions of the machine cracking the egg with another knife in my hands, just to really gain some confidence in the motion without needing to see the machine do it. This probably works sometimes if you aren't dealing with food, but keep watching to find out if that was a mistake. Now at this point you might be thinking, whoa, that looks nothing like the machine from the movie. And yeah, well, first, this is in my style, but more importantly, there's a fundamental difference between making this machine for a movie versus making it at home. And that difference is the machine's mechanization. You see, in the movie, all these main steps happen in sequence carried out by this one object on camera, but you don't see how they're connected to each other. It could all just be wired internally since it's a totally custom-made part, but that doesn't really matter. Now that I'm remaking the machine, I have to make all these connections myself. I'm putting the pieces together rather than having them custom-made. So a lot of what I have to build is a representation of the mechanization as extra machine steps, not just an extra motion by the same object. For example, when the mechanism pulls away from the stove, in the movie they just give the arm another motion and you don't really see how it's triggered. In my machine, I have to put an extra connection behind the mechanism on the table. Another thing I want to address is that, yeah, my machine doesn't cycle through the breakfast making process 3 times, like it looks like it does in the movie. It's just going to crack and deposit one egg, like it does in the one shot the movie got of it working. I think this machine is already walking a fine line because if I add too many extra steps to make it cycle, it would look too cluttered, but if I change the cooking method completely, it would look so radically different. But even then, the movie's machine doesn't even discard the eggshells on camera, and I'm not even sure if it can actually cook multiple breakfasts in one run. I think they just got a shot of it working once, and then the audience can assume that it does the same thing 3 times over, I don't know. The next step was getting the pan off the heat, which required more support than disconnects or blocks. I thought about going and buying more wood to support the frying pan, but then I remembered I had some wood-mounted pegboard and the bottom support was already the perfect size, and since I don't own a good saw right now, I just reused the wood supports and made this rolling thing. After adding a couple delay mechanisms using some straws and a whiteboard, I had finished with the egg section of the machine. Again, while there's a mechanized scale thing in the movie that can just move the plate on and off the heat on its own, I had to actually create the delay mechanism myself in between putting the egg on the pan and getting the pan off the stove. Next, I wanted to build another connects mechanism for the sausage section, looking again to simulate the same motion from the movie, which is this double rotation that also needed to stab and release the sausage. But the sausage looks like it's just sort of thrown off the fork by the centrifugal force, which is honestly kind of a weird motion to put in a machine. Originally, I did create something that had a similar motion, but it really wasn't reliable, and I ended up scrapping it and replacing it with this catapult, which was a backup idea I ended up liking much more than the first design. It's a lot cleaner for my style, and more eye-catching, and more obvious what exactly it is. But I also switched the sausage out for a piece of deli ham, since I don't know what kind of sausage was used in the movie that only needed to cook for 2 minutes or so. The sausages from my grocery store need at least 8 to 10 minutes, and no way I was gonna let the machine run for that long, much less cook it for 2 minutes like in the movie and pass it off as fully cooked. But anyways, deli ham was lighter and much friendlier on the catapult too. Then I made the final connection to the start of the machine, also using a train and a rope, just like the movie. Oh, and I made sure to show that it's 2021, not 1968. But after testing the full machine a few times, I ran into a problem with the egg section. I thought I could have gotten away with not testing real eggs in the machine, as that's the non-wasteful thing to do, and I really thought I had a reliable motion. Again, it's not a decision I usually would have made, but made this time only since I was working with food. Basically, when the machine tried to split the egg, it turns out 4 rubber bands was not enough to pull a cracked egg apart, despite what I imagined it would do. I guess there's a lot more force needed to split a cracked egg that you just don't notice when you're using your hands in the kitchen, and it wasn't a problem with not cracking the egg enough with the knife either, since I also tested a completely pre-cracked egg after that, and it still couldn't be pulled apart. So in another last-second decision, I replaced the egg with a pre-split plastic egg so the machine wouldn't have any problems pulling the two halves apart. This also meant removing the knife on the binder clip, since the egg now didn't need to be cracked in the first place. Thankfully, that was the only part of the machine that really gave me trouble because I made sure the rest of the machine worked consistently without the food, just in case I ran into a situation like this. But that was a build. I definitely made a lot of unconventional building decisions, some that even didn't work out, but I did learn a lot about breakfast food physics, and looking back at this project, I am convinced that a good chunk of the movie machine is fake. Like, that has to be a gimmick egg. No way it gets grabbed and then splits that easily without those grabber things not looking like they hold the egg that firmly. So the takeaways from this project? Show every step of the machine somewhere in the shot. Don't blow your budget on custom mechanized parts when you can get creative and change the machine steps to fit your style. Because if you're building a food and drink machine, you might want to stick with simpler motions and gimmick foods anyways. But despite not knowing whether I could build a machine that could accomplish this task in the first place, I was able to get this working take.
There's really nothing special about the quality of the food. I'm just really happy I was able to make a machine that could cook it. Thank you for watching. As far as my chain reaction video essays go, this was definitely one of the more difficult ones. But more of these videos are on the way, so until then, thank you for supporting chain reaction art.